Okay, before we look at this, just to remind you, originally I said today would be the deadline for the first essay, for the essay for topic 1. Because normally what I do in a kind of normal history of civilization class is we do a topic, then you write the essay, and then on the beginning of the next topic, which is today obviously for us, you would give it in, or submit it to turn it in this case. However, I'm going to be quite busy with kind of personal things in the weekend. It's my wedding anniversary this weekend and things like that. So, thank you. So I'm not going to be sitting in my history office reading lots of papers and calling up things from Turnitin until next week. So I may as well, I've given you on Turnitin, I think you've got until Sunday. So you've got the weekend. And obviously if you're busy with other classes and things, it's difficult, but you've got therefore Saturday and Sunday to kind of finish off the paper and things like that. Has everyone received some kind of notification from Turnitin about the course? Do we all know? So we should all be clear about that, okay. Any problems, please let me know. You can send me an email. I will be at least checking my mail during the weekend, if nothing else. Any questions then about the first essay?
That will be the final draft, right? So
well, there's no real drafts in this. This is the final version, yeah. I mean, you can resubmit something later on, but this is not a draft. This is a final one, and if the grade is good, you stay with that grade. If you think the grade is bad, I'll give you a chance to, maybe one of the essays you can resubmit if you've got time before the end of the course, okay? But that's just, it's not a draft system, it's a resubmission, which may or may not push the grade up, depending on what I can see you've done. Any other questions? No? Okay, let's have a look. So today we begin topic 2. And what you should have in front of you, here it says topic, oh, yes, it does say topic 3. Wait a minute. Clicked on the wrong thing. There we go. The same format, okay? I will briefly describe this topic and the 4 texts that we will be looking at. You can then write your essays about. I will ask for volunteers for presentations, okay, which will be 2 weeks from now, I guess. So we'll have the presentations Friday, 2 weeks from now, okay? And maybe we can have one in a couple of, maybe a bit earlier. We'll have to decide the times for that, but depending on how many volunteers we get. And then on the back, we've got the same format questions and things like that. So let's run through this, and if you've got any questions, you could let me know. And again, the same format we have, online version here. In this topic, we will examine the technological and economic phenomenon known as the Industrial Revolution during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, with special reference to its social and political effects in Western Europe. We're bursting at the seams today with so many people. We will read the works of the following economic, political, and scientific thinkers from this important period. And I've listed them all there. I mentioned their names before. Okay. So, first text, a name I hope you're all familiar with from econ courses, Adam Smith, one of the founders of what used to be called political economy, classical economics, of course, a very important thinker from Scotland, and his perhaps most famous book, An Inquiry into the Origin and Nature of the Wealth of Nations. And again, the same format. We have versions on reserve in the library, or else you can go and look at an online version here. We'll check all the links as we go along. Adam Smith, famous for what? What particular important ideas? A number of important ideas. What's one of his most important ideas that he contributed to economic thinking and organization? There we go, that's the text there. Anyone remember anything from Adam Smith? Any of his ideas?
Free trade,
Sorry? Yes.
lack of government intervention in the economy.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Anyone else? Anything else? Division of something? Division of labour, okay, that's something that we'll mention more than once and things like that, okay. So, very important thinker for the theory and also to some extent the practice of economics during that period. John Stuart Mill, perhaps less familiar to you, he was a very broad-ranging thinker. He wrote on philosophical works, including epistemology and other things, and economics. Here we're looking at his book called On Liberty, a small, short book. We've got just 2 chapters to look at. On Liberty is about, obviously, the concept of liberty. So it's less focused on economic, it's more on social issues, but we're going to try and look at it in the context of the Industrial Revolution and so on. His main idea, one of the big ideas in this book, a classic liberal concept, is that we cannot stop anyone from doing anything. We cannot control anyone's behavior or thoughts unless what they are doing is a negative thing on someone else. Okay, so I can believe in anything. I can believe there's a little man living in the moon, and I can go around giving out pieces of paper telling everyone in the world that there is a little man on the moon. And however ridiculous you think that is, you can't stop me from doing that, he would say, unless somehow I do something nasty with this to Erdem. Okay, I say people with beards are very bad because that's what the little man on the moon told me, or something like that. Then you, the state, the police, or an individual could then stop my freedom of activity if I'm using my ideas or my beliefs or my actions to be nasty to someone else. But if what I'm saying is ridiculous, you don't believe it, but it's not harmful to someone else, it doesn't stop someone else having their own liberty, then you can't actually stop me from doing that. And he explores all these ideas of the origin of authority and things like that. Third text, well, let's just check, hang on, make sure we've got this one working okay. There we go. Third text, very famous 19th century thinker, Marx and his friend Friedrich Engels, the Manifesto of the Communist Party. We'll read most of this. Obviously, very important statement in the development of communist thought. And here is where he looks at the idea of history. He looks at how history develops, and then he puts that into a context, and he tries to explain what will happen later on, and so on. So there's not so much economics in this. It's kind of social or historical or political, but it's based on his analysis of the economic situation, okay, capitalists against working class and things like that. And let's check that one, that should be okay. I remember checking it a few weeks ago, but if you want to use that, we have to make sure. It looks promising, there we go. TheMarxists.org, okay, that's interesting. And our last text is Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species. Now, why? Anyone remember why I've got Charles Darwin in a topic about economics, politics? Why have we got very important work from around about the same time, middle of the 19th century, but it's scientific. So can anyone cast your minds back probably to the first ever class we had, which isn't long ago because this is summer school, everything's squeezed up. Anyone remember why I've included Charles Darwin in this topic? It's not that I'm necessarily trying to make you all believe in evolution, though I would think that would be a good thing myself. But
Social Darwinism?
No, that's a different issue. That will come later on, of course. Social Darwinism is connected to Darwinist thought, but Darwin himself may or may not have disagreed with that. We're looking at the text itself rather than what other people may or may not do with it later on. It's all to do with competition and struggle. Remember? Okay, we said Adam Smith, okay, free trade, competition is the way, open competition, it's the way that an economy will flourish and develop. Marx suggests that all history hitherto is the history of class struggle. It's the conflict, the struggle, the competition between different groups in society, and when one of them wins, we move to a new phase of history. We move from feudalism to capitalism and things like that. And in a sense, Darwin is just saying very much the same thing with animals and species of animals, that they are competing for resources, food and space and so on, and some of them succeed because they have certain features, certain differences, longer neck or something, or stronger arms, and the other ones don't succeed and they disappear. So the principle in all of these, whether it's economics, historical, or scientific, is this idea that progress, development, comes through struggling in some way, competing. Okay? So we could look at his ideas in that context. Okay? And all of these people, Darwin and Smith were British, okay? And Marx spent a lot of, or some of his time living in London, as I've probably said before. They all were living and working in England, which was the first successful industrial nation that was succeeding because it was competing and defeating the other countries. So they may have come up with these ideas partly because of their environment. Okay? So history affecting ideas, you see what I mean? But you may disagree. Maybe that's all a load of rubbish. Okay, we can talk about this as we go along. Okay, so those are our 4 texts. While I'm saying a little bit about the questions, I want those of you who have not yet volunteered for a presentation. We've only had 4 people presenting so far, so we still have, I think, 11 people yet to present. While I'm talking a bit about the questions, please see if you have the courage to volunteer for one of these texts. And again, hopefully we'll get 2 people in each group if possible. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you want to do Marx, is that right? Well, we'll come back to that in a minute. Give the others a chance to work up the courage. So the same format, printed material on reserve in the library or electronic stuff on the web. Okay, any problems, you let me know. Okay, turn over the page then. This is quite an important point now. You must write 2 essays for this course from the choice of 3 topics. Okay. Now, as I've said already, everyone has to write the first essay. So the essay which technically today, but I've said you can finish it and submit it to turn it in on Sunday, the first topic you must all do. So that's one of these gone. So that means you have a choice between 2 topics. Okay. So topic 1, done. Topic 2, topic 3, choice. So now we're beginning topic 2. Now we're here. If you decide not to write an essay for topic 2, if you're not interested in Marx or Darwin or anything like that, then you must write the essay for topic 3. Or vice versa, if this is the thing you like, if you're interested in this and you're not interested in that strange religious topic, our last one, if you want to write your essay here, then you don't have to do it here. Okay? So it's either this or it's this. Okay? But if you decide not to do this one, so by the submission deadline you haven't given me anything, you have to do topic 3. There's no way out of it. You can't say, oh, can't I do topic 2 now? It'll be too late. Okay? Topic 2 has to be submitted at the topic 2 time. Which is, the essay for topic 2 must be submitted to turnitin.com by Sunday, the 11th of July. So that will be in just over 2 weeks' time. Okay, the end of that topic, then an extra couple of days. Same format as we've done before. Remember, if you want to any help with preparing this essay, please come and see me in my office, send me an email or whatever. Same format as before. Choose one of the texts. Research the historical background, which is given again here. Chapters 21, 22, or 23 are the ones you must look at in the textbook. They will give you information relevant to those texts. Put those together and answer one of the questions below. Again, I give you a choice of questions because it's nice to have a choice. And then some texts might be better for one question, some other texts might be better for the other one. So instead of saying you must answer this one, I think that's good. Any essay which does not at least attempt to do these 3 things will not be able to get a high grade, as I've said before. If you have any problems whatsoever, don't hesitate to contact me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and the questions. Number 1, what were the most significant characteristics of the Industrial Revolution? What were the features of the Industrial Revolution? And were these characteristics reflected in the intellectual developments of the age of industry. Okay. Now, is this a ideas to history or a history to ideas question? Anyone want to say?
Ideas.
Turn it round. Try again. History to ideas. Okay. It's saying, what were the significant characteristics of the Industrial Revolution? Okay. That is history stuff. Tell me about the Industrial Revolution. And I'll start, hopefully, in about 5 minutes with a PowerPoint show to start to tell you some of those things. It says, then, were these characteristics reflected in the intellectual developments? Okay, of the time. And intellectual developments is obviously the ideas. So we look at Industrial Revolution, and then we say, in what ways do the people, whoever they might be, even Charles Darwin, we said before, competition, struggle, okay, can we see their ideas coming from some aspects of the Industrial Revolution? What's the connection between them in that way? Second question, if you prefer, typing mistake, in your opinion, put a little R there, in your opinion, what was more important as a force for social and political change during the 19th century? Revolution or reform? Okay, slightly different one here. Revolution and reform I'll talk about. Revolution means big change, often violent change, turning things upside down. Reform means doing it through a parliament, making laws, changing things perhaps a little bit more gradually. Okay, and how do these changes, how do these things affect society and politics during that time? And you use the ideas here. This is less loose. You could see it also in a way as a history and ideas one, but it could also be answered as an ideas and history one. Of course, this could go either way, I suspect. Okay, any questions about this? Anything not clear? Same format. I know you're probably still thinking about your topic 1 essays at the moment, but you'll need to get onto this one shortly. No? Okay, I'll pass now we're all here, I can pass the attendance sheet round and also ask for volunteers. And since Erdem is so eager to do Marx, because he's got a beard as well, so obviously he wants to be like Marx, but not such a good beard as Marx is, then I will be kind and let him put his name down here. And does anyone else wish to join him on Marx or volunteer for one of the other? So just put your name here, Erdem, or something. Any of the others who have not presented yet? Remember, if you don't present this time, you have to present in the third topic. That's at the end of the summer school. You might also be having lots of other homeworks then. If you're doing another course, you will have the final exam coming up. So volunteering now would be quite a good thing. And I do need to have at least 4 names on this page.
So we can't do it alone, right?
Well, it will be a lot of work. And if you want to do it alone, you can, but I'd prefer it to split up that way. We'll have to see how we go. No one? Okay. Well, obviously, Seda, Tuje, Ferhad, and Jamberg can laugh and say, ha, 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 no problem, we've done ours. And everyone else is kind of sweating and trying to hide behind the person in front and thing. Okay, I'll give you another 40 minutes to think about this, and I shall ask again at the beginning of the next class. Okay, and hopefully I will get some response then. Otherwise, I will have to choose names kind of randomly from the list. Okay. We can close this and hopefully open.
So, when's the exact time I'm going to do that?
Well, it depends how many presentations we have, but we can probably, at the latest, it will be 2 weeks from now. It'll be Friday, the whatever it is, 9th or something, 7th or whatever. Yeah, probably the 7th of July, okay, which is 2 weeks from now. So not next Friday, the Friday afterwards, okay? Or maybe, no, it'll be the Wednesday, won't it? Sorry, yeah, it's going to be probably the Wednesday of that week, I suspect. We'll talk about it next week, okay? You need to get the text. What you need to do for next week is start photocopying the text and start thinking. It won't be next week, it'll be the week after, okay? Because each topic is 2 weeks. So yeah, it'll probably be the Wednesday, because I guess we're starting the new topic on Friday, okay? But I'll work this one out, because I need to see you all, if we get more presenters. We need to meet and discuss and start planning the presentations together, okay? Here is an interesting industrial scene, image. What does this say to you, this picture? What does it make you think of, or what is represented here on a simple level?
Well, it looks like city slums, but there are also big, what do you call those?
Chimneys.
Chimneys.
Yeah, it's somewhere probably in the north of England, probably about 100 or more years ago. Chimneys obviously reflect factories, mills, as they used to call them. And then what you're calling slums were the houses of the people that worked in the mills, just all squeezed together. So a typical scene of kind of very close, poor housing, squashed together next to factories. And then obviously you see a lot of smoke and horrible stuff rising up into the air as well. Okay. So this is partly what we're going to be looking at here. Okay, the age of industry and reform. Let's begin, as I always like to, with some definitions, some ways of identifying what we're talking about. Okay, Industrial Revolution. What was the Industrial Revolution? Well, let's begin with the words themselves. Particularly, let's begin with the Latin word industria. Okay, the English word industry obviously comes probably via French from industria in Latin, and this meant just something like hard work, diligence, something like that originally, okay? And in English, we still have the adjective industrious. So, okay, Jamberg is a very hard-working, he's çok çalışkan, okay, student. In English, we could say he's industrious, he's hard-working, okay? Industrious there is coming from the original meaning of industria as kind of work, hard work, okay? It doesn't actually necessarily mean factories and things like that at that stage, okay? The original meaning there just means working hard or whatever. I don't know if we can... Çalışkanlık, would that work? Is that a word or not? Could you have that abstract concept of hard workness or something like that? I don't know. I'm making up as we go along. But now it's come to mean... We have the other adjective, industrial, which means a system of manufacturing, of making things, using factories, using large-scale organisation, the things that we're going to talk about. Okay, so the original meaning of the word has shifted, and in English, industry means large-scale manufacturing now. Okay, a way of making something or some things. The period we're looking at, Circa 1750 to circa 1850. Remind me, what does this little C with a dot mean?
AD.
Sorry?
AD.
No, because that would be AD if I wanted AD or whatever. C, circa. About. Okay, in case some of you were not here when we talked about that. It comes from another Latin word, circa, which means about. Okay, and the point is that if we say the Industrial Revolution began circa 1750, it doesn't mean that on the 1st of January in 1750 everyone said, oh, let's go to a factory now and let's stop working in the countryside anymore or something. It means gradually. It was gradually beginning before that time and after that time, things like that, round about that time. Okay, that's quite important for us here. And it was an economic, obviously, but also a social phenomenon, thing. Okay, it had implications for how we make things, involving technological changes, changes in the machinery, changes in the organization of making things as well, okay? Putting more people together, okay, a workforce in a factory or something like that, very, very important. The development of capitalism, which is a way of organizing labor in that kind of a way, okay? And something else, more social here, urbanism. We see the emergence of large towns because you're making lots of things with lots of people. You've got to put them somewhere. It was those slums, those houses that we saw before, the growth of larger towns. Okay. In the case of England, because it was the first industrial nation, okay, especially in the Midland and in the north of the country is where the Industrial Revolution was particularly important. So all the football cities that you know of, like Manchester and Leeds and these places, 300 years ago, okay, they were small towns or villages, but because of the Industrial Revolution, they became new cities, part of this change in that sense. Okay, so Industrial Revolution means a revolution, a big change. We'll examine that word later on. In terms of making things, it happened during that period, and it was both economic and it was social in the way that it developed. Okay, new classes, new people emerged living in the cities and things like that, doing all these things. This topic is called Age of Industry and Reform. So what is the age of reform? What do I mean by this? What I'm suggesting, and this is to some extent a kind of simplification, I suppose, but there's nothing wrong with that to get ideas across. Age of reform here, perhaps we could suggest beginning in the second quarter of the 19th century. So after about 1820, 1825, we can see things which we might refer to as the age of reform. What is reform? What do we mean by reform? What does that word mean? Can anyone take that word and give it another meaning in English? Scott? Right, change thing. I mean, literally, means to do something again, and form means the shape of something. So you change the shape, you make it in that sense, okay? So it's to do with changing the shape of things. But, so let's put that up. Okay, the simplest level, that's what the word means, okay, to reform something. But what do we usually, when we talk about reforms, if we're talking about today, we're saying Turkish government is making some reforms, which means it's changing something, it's changing the shape or idea of something, but how? What is usually the way that reforms are made in a society, whatever they might be?
Religious.
Well, they could be religious, they could be anything. I'm not saying specifically in Turkey. I'm just saying you can change the social, the religious, whatever it is, but how do you make reforms? Why in English, if we use the word reform, what ways, what mechanisms is someone using, a government or someone else, to do something which we call a reform?
Socially agreement, I guess. I mean, revolution is done against the political rulers, and reform is done by political.
Okay, so yeah, usually a reform is done by the government, by the existing power, okay? And what do? They say, we need to change something. So how do they change it? What do they change in the society to get reforms working, whether it might be religious or social or something? What the government can sit there in their offices, but they need certain things to affect you.
Policies and making laws.
Yeah, okay. Legal change, changing the laws. Okay, this is very simple, basic meaning of this. To reform a society, you have to change the laws that control and govern that society. Okay, whether it's, as we said, religious, political, constitutional, social, whatever it might be. Okay, and so it's done internally. It's done by the government. The government might decide to do it, or they might get pressured into doing it by other people, but it's done within the system. Okay. And we do see during this period some people trying to change laws in England and elsewhere because of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, and I'll explain that process later. But as Erdem has said, other kinds of change, we may or may not really call it reform in this sense, comes through violence, through violent change. This is what we would call revolution. Okay. Usually, not necessarily always, but usually this might come from outside. Okay. There are sufficient numbers of people, they said, we don't like the system, we don't think the government's going to change the system properly or at all, so we're going to take control. Okay? And usually, since the government controls the army and the police, people have to get violent in order to get that power and change things. And we see a revolution, whether it's political, social, whatever. Okay? And you're familiar with the big revolutions in the past few hundred years. We mentioned some, like the French Revolution already. So during this period, we see some people trying to reform society, partly because of what's been going on in society and economy with the Industrial Revolution. Some people saying, we need to change the laws. And other people trying to get more violent change through revolution, because they don't think the governments can do that. Okay? That's, for example, what Marx is arguing for primarily. He wants to have violent change. He wants big change, not little changes of laws gradually in the society. Okay, any questions there? Is that all clear? So we'll look at all these ideas. We're going to look at them all in more detail as we go along. Okay. Before we can look at Industrial Revolution and industry in itself, it's perhaps good to say a little bit about what was going on before. Okay, what was the situation before 1750 or a bit earlier? What was going on in the earlier part of the 18th century or something at the beginning of the 18th century? What was changing? What existed? And so on. Let's begin with, can you read that? The colour is not clear. Pre-industrial society. Is that legible? Okay, people, society, say round about, let's say round about 1700. Okay. People, society in that time, where do you think most people lived? Where in Western Europe, in France or England or wherever, where were most people living during, at that time? Okay, Tuche. Countryside, okay. Society at that time, as it had been for many centuries before, was mostly rural, okay, which means people were living and working in the countryside and living and working with the land. Okay. Land was perhaps the most important resource. You either owned and controlled the land, in which case you were a landowner, and there were not many people like that, okay? These are the nobles, the aristocrats that we've talked about before. Or you were a peasant. Some peasants were a little bit wealthier and they may have owned a little bit of land themselves, so they were kind of peasant landowners, but the majority of people did not own land, they worked for someone else, another peasant or the wealthy landowner. Okay. Some of them were fairly free, some of them, even at this time, the further east you go, were still tied to the land, not quite like slaves, but their options in life were rather limited. And most of this, therefore, involved agriculture, okay? Growing crops, growing plants that people can eat, and looking after animals that we can use for milk or eating the animals as well. Okay, so it was primarily involving the process of producing food for society. Some people lived in towns. There were towns, not big cities like London today or Istanbul, nothing compared to what we have today, but by their own standards, and to some extent by the standards of 1,000 years earlier, fairly large towns, relatively large towns, we can call them cities, but They were not cities in our sense. Okay? And these places were dominated by the bourgeoisie, which comes to mean industrial middle class. It means middle class. But the original, this is a G here, not che. Bourg bit there. Does anyone know what the English word borough, like in Edinburgh, capital of Scotland, borough means?
Borough.
A borough, what does it mean? Give a guess. A borough is what? Is it a pen? Obviously not. Is it a person? No, it's a kind of place. Okay, what kind of place? A town. Okay, it's another word for a town. Not a small village, not a curry, a town. Okay, a borough. Edinburgh means the Edin town or whatever. And this is essentially the same word in French here. Okay, bourgeoisie means townspeople, literally. Okay, something like that. The people of the town. Okay, the town dwellers, something like that. And before the Industrial Revolution, the bourgeoisie were either professionals, like, say, lawyers, things like that, okay, or they were involved in commerce and manufacturing, because things had to be made. Okay? People needed clothes, people needed tables, so things were made in that time. And a lot of manufacturing, and especially commerce, went on, was done in towns. We'll look at the manufacturing a bit later on, but they were the minority. Okay? These towns were small by our standards. Most people still lived in the countryside. Okay, before the Industrial Revolution, there was in the 18th century something called the Agricultural Revolution. Okay? Something happened, a revolution, a big change in agriculture, in farming, the way that animals were kept and plants were grown for eating. Now the background partly to this, and in a sense partly to the Industrial Revolution, is during the 18th century, so from 1700 to, say, 1800, during that period, there was a very, very big increase in population. Population is what? What does that mean? Juju?
All countries, people, some of them.
Yeah, it's all the people living in a particular place. It can be a country or a region or whatever. I think nüfus is the Turkish word, okay? There was, during that 100 years or so, a very, very big increase in the number of people living in Western Europe, okay? The figures I've got, which I don't suppose are exactly accurate, so let's say, at the beginning, there were about 120 million people living in Western Europe. By the end, that had increased to about 180 million. So that's an increase of 60 million. It's about 50%. Okay, used Eli, very big increase there in population. So if
it's happening 100 years.
it's happening during that period, I'm not sure exactly when it began. I don't know the details, but it happens during that period. You might think that's not a big deal, but compared to what had been going on before, where population was always increasing a little bit, this was a very big increase, okay, a massive increase. So the problem is that the structures they had to look after the population, to provide food and clothing and anything else we might need, had more or less been able to cope with the gradual increase. But if over 2 generations, 3 generations, it's not very long, suddenly it goes up a lot, then that puts pressure on the system, more demand. Okay? There is suddenly an increasing demand for food. There is suddenly an increasing demand for clothing, okay, and anything like that. And so they needed to change the way they made food, they needed to change the way they made clothing and so on. So the food thing is the agricultural revolution. Okay? During this period, during the earlier phases, we see changes in the ways that things were made. So what happens, I'm writing a lot today, I'm running out of space. Firstly, we see they need to make more food, large scale. They need to produce more food, more meat, more plants and so on to eat on a larger scale. They need to make more, okay, because there's more mouths to feed, okay? And one of the products of that is that agriculture becomes more commercial, okay, as well. Before that time, earlier on, to some extent, it had been relatively subsistence-based. Subsistence means, okay, we're a farm. This is a small village. Okay, I'm the landowner. Ha 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 ha. I'm the lord, and you're all the peasants working for me. And you work all day very hard on the fields, growing things, working on my land and the little bit of land you might have. And we produce lots of food or whatever. And the main purpose is for you to eat that food and your families. And if we have any extra, we can sell that. We can swap it with someone else. But, okay, subsistence is the main thing, keeping ourselves alive, okay? That's the main key. I'm interested in, obviously, getting the extra from you so I can make a little profit or something. But to a large extent, they were not large-scale production, okay? What happens during this time, because of population increase, because of the increase in people, is they make more, okay? And then it becomes more commercial. So it's not just, let's make enough food for ourselves. It's let's make lots of food, sell it, and then make a profit, okay? Hopefully the profit will go to me, not you, but that's another matter. So that's one change, a shift from subsistence to a commercial approach and a large-scale production of food, larger, okay? Also, before that time, in large parts of Europe, they had had an open field system. So fields, my fields, another landlord's fields, the fields that you might work on or own, were not closed up. They were just open. The whole of the land was more or less open up. So you could walk across one man's field into another man's field and things like that. And they were all broken up into little fields, little bits. Okay, you had some fields there, you had some fields there, they were scattered around. What happens during this period is that they realize this is not a very efficient, a very good way of doing things. So there is a move towards enclosure, closing up the land, putting in fences, putting in hedges to mark off the land, putting all the land together. So then I say, okay, I don't want you to have this field and you to have that field, so on. It's all broken up. Let's just make it into one big field and grow one thing on that, okay? Instead of you doing something here and you doing something there. And then let's put a big fence around it. That's a more efficient way. We can produce more in that way, okay? And any other things, but let me just... Specialization. If you're no longer thinking in terms of subsistence, okay, then things change. In the old system, in the previous system with subsistence, if this is our little estate with me as the landowner, well, we need to produce meat, we also need to produce corn, we also need to have eggs, we need to do a lot of things, okay, because we need a balanced diet, we need all sorts of different food. Now we're saying subsistence, just feeding ourselves, isn't so important. We're going for commercial. We want large scale. So let's not waste time with Erdem doing the cows and Tujé doing the sheep, Jambout doing something else. Let's all focus on one big thing, okay, one or two crops. Let's make it a specialization, what we would call division of labor. Okay? So we'll produce lots and lots of cows on our farm, but the people in the other classroom, the other farm, they'll do sheep farming. Okay? But we'll be more efficient because we'll be the big cow guys. Okay? So, again, putting it a bit simply, that's what went on. Great, putting bigger land together, making big farms and specializing rather than trying to do everything. Okay? Which then helps you to produce more meat or whatever it might be. They also worked out, they introduced some new crops, last point. okay, because they had a problem. If we're growing things on this field all the time, the land, like you and me, gets a bit tired, needs a rest, okay? And what they'd had to do before is they'd done something called crop rotation. So part of the year we'll grow something on here, next part of the year we'll grow something different on here, and then the next part of the year we'll leave it empty. Okay, just let grass grow there or something. But during that last period, we're not really doing anything with this land. It's kind of being wasted. Okay, we're not getting the most out of it. We want large-scale production. We want more efficient. So, for example, they developed ways of keeping the land working for a larger part of the year. So what we call in English, for example, clover, growing clover, which means yonca in Turkish, okay? You grow that for a little while, it very quickly puts the goodness, the strength back into the land. Then you can grow crops on that, things like that. They found ways of using the land more efficiently during this period, okay, so that they could increase production. And there were more other things, but we'll stop there. So that's the agricultural revolution. And remember the big concepts: large scale, commerce, okay, increasing demand, putting things together instead of everyone doing separate things, specialization. All these things we see here, we'll also see them in the Industrial Revolution. Tamam? Okay, let's stop, have a break, and then we shall carry on looking at pre-industrial manufacturing.